Alright, everybody, we should be live for our next developer cast here on the Game Wisdom channel. I am Josh Placer, and for tonight, we're going to be talking with the developer of the Crimson Diamond, a retro style pixel adventure game. She is also a sole developer, and we're going to be discussing that and more. So please welcome to the cast, Julia. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good, Josh. How are you?
I am doing great. As I've been telling everyone, being stuck inside has not affected doing all these casts, so I've been pretty much as busy as ever.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, solo indie dev, so it hasn't really changed a lot of my day to day, but it's different. It feels different.
hmm Yep, it is great to have you on. As I was telling Julia before, we've certainly spoken to a lot of adventure developers, Dave Gilbert. We've also been talking a lot with developers who've been working more on like modern retro design, focusing on trying to bring a classical game to the modern audience. So this should be a very interesting chat with the Crimson Diamond. So to begin with, since this is your first time on, could you talk a little bit about your background in game dev and what is the Crimson Diamond for the folks watching us?
Okay, yeah. So, as for my background in game dev, the Crimson Diamond is my first project, and so I don't really have much of a background.
hmm
Although I feel like it's been something I've been interested in doing ever since I was really young, like 6 or 7 years old, actually. Um, ever since I had a Commodore VIC-20, and I had one of those books of the codes, the game programs that you could just transcribe word for word, try to get something to work. At 6 or 7, it was a bit beyond me, but I kept being interested, and I'd play the classics, Sierra, LucasArts games, and in high school took a few courses here and there, but didn't really pursue it until I would say after college, when I was actually able to find a tool that worked for me, that was accessible and had a community that was active, that I could ask for help.
hmm
So that's kind of my experience.
Okay. And what tool are you using for the people watching?
Right. I am using Adventure Game Studio, which
hmm
is an open source development tool specifically for adventure games, which is kind of perfect for me. As being a first time developer and sort of learning the programming as I go along. It is it's scripting language based on C, is what I've looked up on Wikipedia, and it's great because it's purpose built for this type of game, and that's exactly what I was looking for.
Great. And so, obviously, with that kind of spoiler, then, for the Crimson Diamond, what kind of adventure game are you developing with it?
I am developing a sort of a mystery text parser mystery adventure game, sort of in the classics. I kind of have my banner that I have up here in the background to give you an idea of sort of the color palette that I'm going for. It's a Sierra style SCI EGA type of art, and it's a mystery game that's set in northern Canada, in Ontario, actually.
Great. And as we were saying at the beginning, that this is a solo project. You've been doing this all yourself?
Yeah, up until fairly recently, I've got a musician working with me now on some songs and things that he's doing some original stuff. But other than that, yeah, it's been me doing the art and the writing and the programming and all the rest of it. So yeah, it's been pretty solo, and still mostly solo, except with the music, which I really appreciate having someone else come in.
Oh yes, I have no musical talent whatsoever, so
Me either.
yeah, like there's not going to be any live musical bands here for these streams anytime soon, or no music provided by me.
Yeah, that's exactly me. I couldn't even begin. I wouldn't know where to start. But what's really nice about having another person on the project is you kind of get sort of a fresh way of looking at things, and you get something new to look forward to that you didn't actually create on your own, and that's been really exciting for me. So to have that extra aspect has been really refreshing.
hmm So, how long have you been working on the Crimson Diamond for?
That is, it's an interesting question because it's really been probably too long working on it because it was a hobby project and that's kind of how it started. So it's been like 10 years or give or take a year.
Oof.
But then again, I was not working on it full time like I
hmm
am now. I've only started working on it full time for the past about year and a half or so. So yeah, it's kind of hard to time because I would leave it for weeks and months and not come back
Mm-hmm.
to it until later, and then pick it back up again and forget where it was, and add more here, add more there, and it was very willy nilly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, until I actually in November 2018, I got it into a show here in Toronto, and I had to make a demo for it. And so I kind of had to focus and direct my development for showing it to other people, which I hadn't done before. And that's kind of how I really got started focusing on developing a vertical slice, and
Mm-hmm.
then going forward, having that as a template to continue to develop in that same way.
Yeah. And that's always very tricky, I think, for a lot of first time developers, and just in terms of how long they spend on a project.
Mm-hmm.
When I
Mm-hmm.
spoke with the developer of Manifold Garden, whose name unfortunately escapes me at the moment, I'll have to look it up while you're answering this. Part of the challenge is just sometimes knowing how long do you really want to spend on a
Mm-hmm.
title? Because as the regular developers or some of the long-standing ones who are watching this know, anything that you set as a timetable, it will usually be 2 to 3 times more than that. There is no such thing as finishing a game early for a lot of indie devs.
Yeah, I'd say that's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing first because when you're working by yourself, you can take as long as you want to develop bits, and you can put things in there that aren't just for efficiency reasons. I mean that I can make more backgrounds, I can make more rooms for
Mm-hmm.
the game that don't necessarily have a game purpose, but they have a purpose because they set the stage and they set the mood and they give you a sense of the environment that the game is taking
Mm-hmm.
place in. And I don't have to worry about billing the artist extra, or getting them to do extra work for me. So that's great, and that aspect of control is really good. But of course, the other side of that coin is, yeah, you can get lost in it, and
Yeah.
you can just add and add and add, and then kind of get where I was before with it being a hobby project and just gilding things and just developing things overly and then leaving some other stuff. And I think it's important to really have a plan if you actually
Mm-hmm.
end up deciding to finish something or try to finish something.
Yep. And I just looked up. The developer was William Cheer. William Cheer. I hope I didn't butcher his name too much. And he spent about 7 years working on
Yeah.
Manifold Garden. I think once again it started out as just being a simple project. I'll spend 2 3 months on it and then it will be done. Then I'll make the real game. And then, of
Right.
course, things can dramatically balloon. As you were saying, it's very easy. And again, this is something that I've seen a lot of first time developers fall into that trap of
Mm-hmm.
I am just going to keep adding more and more of this idea. It will be my dream, my magnum
Yes.
opus. It will be done. I will become rich and famous. I don't care if it takes me 30 years. I'm going to make this
Mm-hmm.
game. And then what usually ends up happening, unfortunately, is either A, the game never gets finished, or
Mm-hmm.
B, it's just this colossal mess of mechanics and systems that doesn't really have a focus to it.
Yeah, I will say that that it's a good thing and a bad thing, because when you're working by yourself, you can give it a unique take and a unique. It can be amazing in some ways and not so amazing in other ways. And I kind of live for that sometimes when I see other small projects.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's a tough one. It's a tough one because um, you like you say, you end up spending so much time on it and you think it's going to be your big thing. And when I started reading about game development and game design, way after I had started this project,
Mm-hmm.
I saw that the first rule is, start small. Start, like, just do a
Mm-hmm.
little small little project. You can start from beginning to end, so you can see what that whole process is like. And by the time I'd read that, I'd already gone so far into this process, and I haven't gotten to those stages. I haven't gone through the whole process yet, so I really don't know what's in store for me yet.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's already been too much, and I kind of had this idea and I developed it, but it would have been smarter to sort of start smaller.
I think, Kat, I think that's a light shining down. It's making my hands extra pale here because they are pretty pink on the other side. Yeah, and that's always been that tough thing especially for a lot of developers who are just starting out. That you have, like, everyone that I've spoken to who has kind of gone to become established has always said your first project should try to be your smallest. It should be the
Mm-hmm.
one that you want to get done as quickly as you can to then kind of use that knowledge to go forward. And let me see. And as
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say I'm not reading that. I tried to get on the chat, but I found it was too distracting, so I'm
Okay.
gonna just let you handle that.
Yeah, sure. If you have any questions for Julia, let me know. Feel free to post them in the comments, and I will bring them up as we have the time. But the adventure game genre, I think, is very fascinating, and this is something that I've spoken to Dave about, as well as Ron. I've spoken to both Gilberts, Dave and Ron Gilbert, in the past. Never on the same cast, though. We need to do that at some point. And the adventure genre is one of the industry's more longer-lasting ones. You mentioned, of course, the Sierra era, the
Yes.
likes of King's Quest. What was it? Space Quest. There's so many of
Hmm.
them, and like for myself personally, that was like one of those eras that I kind of did miss. I was not old enough to really appreciate or figure out a lot of those old school adventure games. I guess what attracted you, or like what kind of inspired you to base your first game around that particular genre?
Well, I think it was basically what I got exposed to real when I was really young, like when I was again 5 or 6 years old. And my dad brought a laptop home from work, and what I mean by laptop, it was the size of a suitcase, and it had a little monitor that was like this big on it, and it had King's Quest One. And that was one of the first games I remember really sticking out to me, and so that was kind of what I got started with. And we weren't a console family; we were mostly we were just about all PC, and so I never really cultivated the eye hand coordination for the platformy stuff. So that's kind of also why I gravitated toward the genre, I would say.
And I am the complete opposite there. I was the console guy who played all the
Right.
bub platformers and then hit that lovely wall when it came to trying to solve some of those early school adventure games. I remember the nightmare trying to play Myst for the first time with no puzzle or adventure game background.
Right. Well, I will say that even in those days, I don't think I was ever really any good at them. I did find I had to use a lot of hints
Oh,
and things, like
yes.
the hint books back in the day. It was just kind of difficult by design, which is something we can talk about how I'm
Oh,
developing
yes.
my game. It's not going to be like that, long story short.
Hmm.
But yeah, I also like them for the story. But yeah, the puzzles were always kind of tough, and I don't think I ever really conquered that. Like I can never boast any completions without any walkthrough really for any of those things.
So, what were like some of like your favorite adventure games? Like besides the Sierra, were there any major ones that kind of influenced you with the Crimson Diamond?
Well, it's funny because my favorite games at the time were the LucasArts games and not the Sierra games
Mm,
because the game design was much more forgiving.
yeah.
Yeah, so the puzzles were, for the most part, better designed, and you couldn't get stuck in an area where you forgot to pick something up, and then you proceeded through the game, and then you just couldn't get any further, and there's no indication that you couldn't.
Hmm.
But so I'll say that Day of the Tentacle is one that I really love. Um, I really love, well, for Sierra, like my primary inspiration was the Colonel's Bequest for the art. And actually a lot of the game design I find was ahead of its time back in 89 because
Hmm.
Roberta Williams, when she designed it, it wasn't puzzle focused, it was more story focused.
Hmm.
And that's kind of what I'm going for as well.
Yeah. Like for myself, I don't. I think Day of the Tentacle is one that I missed. I did try to
Ooh,
play Maniac Mansion. This was like 5, 6 years
right.
ago, and just got stomped by it. I will say I did play Monkey Island. They did the re-release of that
Yes.
from
Yep.
Double Fine,
Mm-hmm.
and of course Grim Fandango. I did play some of
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like so much of the adventure genre has been about trying to marry storytelling with the puzzle design. And I think that alone, I think that one sense that could be an entire hour's worth of a podcast discussion. Because
Oh
I'm
yeah.
I'm sure as an adventure game designer fan, you of course have been following, just how much the genre has changed
Mm-hmm.
over the last 20 years. From, the rise and fall of Telltale to again, like allowing more indie developers to make their own adventure games.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of that push and pull between do I make a very story driven game minus, the crazy puzzles and moon logic, Or do I make that, insanely complicated? If I don't pick up the sponge in the sink in the very
Mm-hmm.
first scene, I won't be able to stop a robot 5 hours
Mm-hmm.
in kind of
Mm-hmm.
design.
Yeah, I tend to be one of the people who really wants players to enjoy the story of these things, to go through it. Again, with the Colonel's Bequest, you could kind of get to an ending that wasn't just like a random death, like you
Hmm.
just not falling down the stairs. You could actually get to a story ending, even though you didn't necessarily know what was going on. And I think I do appreciate that more, especially now. Like the really hard puzzles that made people buy the hint books that were very lucrative is not an option anymore.
Yeah.
So I tend to go with the, yeah, let's just give everyone a good story. And maybe when we give a good story that isn't necessarily overly complicated with puzzles, that are too hard, maybe we can broaden the audience for these things and have more people interested in playing them, because I think there are probably more people interested in sort of experiencing a story and being in that world versus the puzzles, the
Hmm.
puzzly puzzle part. I
Yeah.
think it could appeal to more people.
Yeah. And to Dion's point in chat, I think I did play Sam and Max. I remember it was being given free with some game. I forget what game I bought that it was given as a freebie, and I did play through it at that point. Sam and Max hit the road, as well as, of course, the 3 seasons that Telltale put out for it.
Right. Yeah, they're great. I remember Sam and Max Hit the Road. I played, I think, the first two of the 3D ones. I will say that I do tend to favor the 2D art of these of
Mm-hmm.
adventure games in general. So I wasn't too much of a fan of the way that the newer stuff looked. But they're great games, like the humor and the writing, which is something that I enjoy making with my game. I really enjoy seeing good humor, well, good writing in general, just in these types of things, because with this style, that's kind of almost your only trick
Yeah.
is good writing. I mean, if you're not going to have really crazy puzzles, then you need to have, for me anyway, good writing, good characters, setting, and some good art.
Yeah. And I guess as a question for you, did you play a Thimbleweed Park that came out? I think I want to say 2 years ago, 2 or 3,
I think, was it? Oh, I don't know. I think it might have been even been three, which kind of
something.
freaks me out. Something like that.
I know.
Oh, time. That's another thing we can talk about. Just how time is just, it's too fast and it just
Mm-hmm.
gets faster. But yeah, I love Thimbleweed Park. To me, it was kind of, I don't want to say the most faithful, because I think if it was the most faithful adventure game, then I don't think it would have been as good. I think it was the best modern take on classic adventure games
Mm-hmm.
that we've seen recently, and at that level of, that just Ron Gilbert, and just the, like, he brought back, Mark Ferrari with the
Mm-hmm.
art, and they had some other like amazing pixel art people, and it was a it was an adventure game. It was
Mm-hmm.
point, it was click, it was as simple as you could imagine. But it's not, for me, a matter of, is it simple or is it complicated or is it intricate. It's a matter of doing something really well that
Mm-hmm.
might be simple. That to me is the beauty of adventure games.
Yeah. And I will admit, I did play Thimbleweed Park, but I did get stuck at a few puzzles and I tapped out. I think this was about halfway through. I tried to call
Mm.
Ron his number on the phone book in that game, and he wasn't giving me any help. So unfortunately, I had to stop playing there. Let's see. Jay Holmes in chat asked, since Crimson Dime is modeled after Colonel's Bequest EJ16 color, if we ever did get to see a sequel, would it be more like Dagger of Amon Ra VGA?
Ooh. um, I'm gonna say no, and I'm gonna say no because the EGA color palette is kind of what brought me to starting to develop the game in the first place. It's my first love, really. It's my first thing about these games that brought me back from having, I had a time, I think, I don't think it's uncommon for people to say this, but if you're an adventure game fan and you were playing the stuff in the late 80s and early 90s, what happened in the 90s was that 3D started becoming a thing, really like
Mm-hmm.
low poly, bad 3D, and then everyone wanted to do 3D or FMV, and I kind of lost interest at that point. It wasn't aesthetically what I like, so I stopped playing like games in general for probably years. And it's not only it's only until, I would say, yeah, like after college that I started going back, and all of a sudden there was some new stuff that had come along, like adventure game studio games and other things that started to catch my attention because they looked like the stuff that I liked and
Mm-hmm.
what I remember. And so when I started the Crimson Diamond, it started as recreating the type of art that I liked seeing, which is the EGA art.
Mm-hmm.
There is a clarity to the art. Back in the day, it was vector based, and so it's always been perfectly clear. You can see every pixel, and you can see what
Mm-hmm.
every pixel is doing, and to achieve the effect that you see on screen. And that's what I love the most about it.
Yeah.
I do love the VGA too, though, but I find VGA kind of it was blurry at the beginning, and I don't think I ever really got over that.
Mm-hmm. And again, for all the young people watching this right now who didn't grow up with first generation 3D, that was definitely a trip. I remember people saying, this would be the future of everything, and it
Mm,
like cost like $10 million to animate or something.
yep.
And it's come a long way. I think for myself, like I grew up again more on the console side, so my remembrance, of course, is for pixel art. 8-bit,
Hmm.
16-bit, and again, it's been one of those fascinating aspects of the independent scene, both with the adventure game genre and with
Hmm.
platforming and retro titles. Just being able to not only emulate that style, but in many cases actually iterate or evolve.
Yes,
If
exactly, like
you,
Shovel Knight and stuff like that.
yes, or Owl
Yes.
Boy that came out.
Yes. Yep.
Oof,
Yep.
again, my time has no meaning for me. I don't remember years at this point.
Nope, me either. I couldn't help you with that. I'm sorry.
Let me see. We got some
But well, your example with the pixel art and having an indie dev studios, I think is a good one because this type of art, at least in my experience, is it's not like God of War where you need a platoon of developers and
Mm-hmm.
people who just specialize in lighting or someone who specializes in textures. Now you've got hundreds of people spending thousands of hours and
Mm-hmm.
millions of dollars. I mean, with the indie space, it's possible to achieve a look that is appealing to not only people who remember that look back in the
Mm-hmm.
day, but people who are just coming to it new. Like to them, it's just an art style. It has nothing to do with the technological limitation that it used to have,
Yeah.
and they think it's cool. Like when I showed my game at EGLX in Toronto last year, people who had never young kids who had never seen this style before it was eye-catching for them, and I
Yeah.
thought that was really encouraging because I kind of always figured the game would only really appeal to people that remember this style, but that actually hasn't been the case, which has been really cool.
Yeah, and that's something I found very interesting of having younger people who didn't grow up kind of being attracted to these games. I remember I spoke to developers working on a Scold Against the Black Priory, which is a
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
emulation of the Apple old school CRPG, like Apple, I forget which
Mm-hmm.
version. And he was talking about how he had like kids and younger people. I think also Mark Radosi, who's working on another one whose name escapes me right now. The only remember is what Apple or Mon Retro RPG he's working on. Please let me know in chat. And he was talking about again that kind of balance of I want to make something that appeals, to this old school fan or to the people who grew up with it, but I still want to be appealing to somebody who has never played these games, who's never heard of any of those old school CRPGs,
Mm-hmm.
and I want them to be able to get something out of it.
Exactly. And I think showing the game at places, especially if you're solo or someone with a small team, showing it in public like that, I think it's amazing for so many reasons. And one of them is finding out that yes, this is something that we could conceivably have an audience for that we might not have necessarily thought that we would have. And another good thing about having it at a show is you kind of get like live play testing, which is kind of nice. You can see people play it and you can see where they get stuck or you can see where they get confused, and that's really really valuable too.
Mm-hmm. And I think what's also kind of fun is I was just saying about some of my other podcasts, and I remember speaking with Katie Holohan of Phoenix Online
Yes.
Studios, and again, like they got started because they wanted to make a fan game to King's
Mm-hmm.
Quest,
Yep.
and it just kind of blew up from there. So I think that's always been that very fascinating thing about the independent space is being able to take these genres or these concepts that you love and then figure out a way to bring them to a different audience or make them more appealing. Because as we've said, and I'll get to a Tree's comment in a minute, a lot of the like first generation or early generation adventure games don't necessarily hold up in terms of their design and playability today.
It's true.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Let me get to some of these comments here. Dion asked, "Will Crimson Diamond be released on floppy disks for kicks?"
um, I'm. You know what? I kind of had this idea that wouldn't it be cool if I could find like USB drives that were shaped like floppy disks, and because I'm pretty sure it would fit on one of those, and kind of sell them at shows in like Ziploc bags. And photocopied manuals. That would be fun and something I could see myself doing, but I don't see myself actually doing a physical release of the game. It's expensive, and I know collectors love that, and I love it too. But it's one of those things where, yeah, as a solo person, not only you're kind of responsible for all the work, but I don't have anyone else to sort of share that financial burden of producing stuff like that. And that goes for traveling as well, like traveling to shows, tables and stuff. Like I can't split the cost of a table with people because it's just me.
Yeah. And just for my clarification, I did look up the developer. The game is Nox Arceus, Mark Lemmert. That's
Cool.
a guy who's working on that one. And again, and like we say, like he wanted to make an old school 8-bit style
Mm-hmm.
CRPG, and lo and behold, he got people interested, and he is currently working on that one now.
Yeah, when I went to PAX East in Boston, like the last big public event in the world, in for the year probably, I saw some awesome things where people were developing games for Nintendo cartridges that
Mm-hmm.
fit on Nintendo cartridges. They actually put them on cartridges, and I
Yep.
think that's amazing. I could nothing but respect for that. The thing is I'm not a good enough programmer to know all the tricks to compress something into such a small space. Really, I'm a pretty sloppy programmer. It just works, and if it if it works, I'm happy. But there would have been no reason why it couldn't fit. But I gotta say, as the demo as it stands, and there is a demo on Steam if you want to try the game. The first chapter is free. I think the demo when you unzip it is like 50 megabytes or something. So already that's that's bigger than the Colonel's Bequest ever was. I'm pretty sure. So
That is always like that's like as a quick tangent. It's always so weird about like when we talk about like sizes of games, like because again like for people who follow me, I play a ton of indie games, so it's like
Mhm.
this is only like 300 megabytes, and then like, I have next to like a AAA game. This is 90,000
Well,
megabytes.
here's the thing: is like even my Facebook app update on my phone is 250 megabytes, right? So it's ridiculous.
Let's see. Ken in chat ever played the Laura Bow games?
Oh
I
yeah.
have not, but why does that name sound familiar to me?
Yeah, so that is Laura Bow 1 was the Colonel's Bequest,
Okay.
which is the art that is very similar to what I've done here. And the Colonel's Book, Laura Bow 2, which is the Dagger of Amon Ra, which is the second of the series that they did of mystery games. And I really wish that Sierra had made more mystery games after that, because as a narrative focused game, I think having a mystery game is almost like a natural thing, because a lot of times what the player is doing in an adventure game, regardless of genre, is a lot like mystery game where you're solving problems, you're finding out people, what people are up to, and all and trying to find insight and stuff like that. So I find it's a real natural fit. So to me it was a real shame that they didn't make more.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I definitely want to ask you more about, as we get later on to our little discussion, we'll talk more specifically about the Crimson Diamond, about the mystery angle, because that's something that I have not seen too much of, at least, again, from my own point of view. But again, I am not the hardcore adventure guy. Ken in chat, he is definitely more, he's the one who got me hooked on the Watchet Eye games, a whole
Yep.
Blackwell series,
Hmm.
etc.
Even Lamplight City by Francisco
Yes.
Gonzalez, yes,
Mm-hmm.
another good one. And again, Dave Gilbert and Francisco, they both use Adventure Game Studio.
Yep.
um, and talking about Adventure Game Studio as a tool, that was a huge deal for me and helped me, sort of encouraged me to even start developing my game. um, because not only did I see that people were making games in this, and not only is there an active community still to this day, like a forum where if you have a technical problem, which I have had, I could post my issue, and then I've had several solutions come up, and that's really helped me along.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's also a matter of yeah, it's purpose built for adventure games, and there are tutorials online
Yep.
too. On YouTube, you can go step by step and just do, build a basic game. And just everything is so much more accessible to people like me who kind of always wanted to make a game and never really felt like they had the know-how. Now it's just all at our fingertips, which is really exciting.
Yeah. Now here's a question for you regarding the adventure game studio and that kind of engine.
Mm-hmm.
I know for a lot of my regulars, and one thing that we've seen is that when it comes to something like RPG Maker, there's definitely
Mm-hmm.
been like negative opinions on that. There's a lot of people who do not like that as a engine or something to develop
Right.
games with. Is
Mm-hmm.
there or are there any like stigmas
Mm-hmm.
for Adventure Game Studio, or has it I think kind of avoided that?
It's kind of funny that you mentioned that because I've had people tell me that my game does not look like an adventure game studio game,
Mm-hmm.
which is weird because it's an adventure game,
Mm-hmm.
and but I think what gets people is, I guess, the visual. I think they might connect adventure game studio game with a certain type of aesthetic, maybe, and because I'm using the EGA color palette, the 16 color palette that's extremely bright, and also because it's a text adventure game, and there
Mm-hmm.
haven't really been a lot of text adventure
Yeah.
games developed in Adventure Game Studio. I think both of those things combined makes people not think of it as an Adventure Game Studio game or something they would expect of an Adventure Game Studio game.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if there's necessarily a stigma, but I think there might be an expectation because like Wadjet Eye has done such a fantastic
Yep.
job of having like a consistent, like I wouldn't say maybe consistent aesthetic, but there is a certain like way the games look and the way the games play, and he's done a really great job of branding the type of games that he makes. And I think maybe when people think Adventure Game Studio, they think that that's the style, like that's exactly what it's going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
So I have had people say that it doesn't look that way, for good or bad. I'm not too sure.
And I think it again has to do with like kind of like the very wide spectrum that you can get out of some of these public engines. Again, like Unity being another big example. There's a very huge difference between kind of like the lower quality games, and then we see stuff like Hollow Knight that was built on
Right,
Unity, and a lot of
right.
other titles along those lines.
Yeah, I kind of get that feeling too, where you think Unity game, and you might have this ideas in your head of what that looks like awkward
Mm-hmm.
3D models or some weird assets that are just plugged in,
Mm-hmm.
and but the ones that you don't think are Unity games, are you like, is it Hollow Knight? You don't.
Yeah.
There's no reason why it can't be a Unity game, but people have these negative associations with engines sometimes because I guess there's like a lot of that going on, maybe where it's just like this subpar stuff.
Yeah. And we got a lot of questions in chat and comments as well. So
Oh, nice.
let's see if we can go through some of them. So Tree Ghetto wanted us to talk about the insane logic of early adventure games, especially Sierra titles. And that is something that, again, like when we talk about aspects that don't really hold up in today's
Mhm.
market, it would be those kinds of those kinds of puzzle designs. Probably the one that any adventure game player has heard of is, of course, the infamous Mustache Cat from.
Yes.
I always forget the name of the which game it was.
Was it was it is it a Gabriel Knight game?
I want to
The
say
same cat?
so.
Was it Phantasmagoria?
I don't think it was Phantasmagoria. I actually own that one too from GOG. I have all these games I just like bought like on a whim. Uh,
Yeah.
Sir Thomas said Gabriel Knight 3.
Okay, it was a Gabriel Knight game. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the thing. Back in the day, especially with games like Leisure Suit Larry,
Mm-hmm.
Al Lowe has said that the hint books made like 3 times as much money as the game
Yeah.
ever did because of piracy, because people were just copying. The discs were that easy to copy. There was no DRM at that time, really. Besides, look up, in the manual, page 5, line 2, second word, and then you would enter that in, and that would get you in. Or in Larry cases, there'd be like a quiz that would, see how old you were, etc. But they were pretty easy to brute force,
Mm-hmm.
as many children found out. But yeah, so he with the piracy, so the hint books were kind of a really really great revenue stream for the games. That because pre-internet we're talking, of course, that was something that was open to them. So I think the rumor was that they were encouraged to put in some really really unfair, I would say,
Hmm.
puzzles in the game so they could sell the hint books. But as we all know, it's not on nowadays.
Yeah. And I think I did speak with Roberta Williams about this. I think when we were talking about Mobius, this was like 5 or 6 years ago. And she said something similar, that they were, again, designed as a way to basically get more money out of the person, because an adventure game,
Mm-hmm.
if you know all the puzzles, it is a relatively short game. You can probably play
Yes.
through it in maybe an hour or less. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It's like when people ask me how long my game is, that's a kind of a tough one to answer because yeah, it kind of depends
Hmm. Oh,
how how kind of they if they're going to be really methodical but looking at everything, how slow they read or everything. There's so many factors.
yeah. Oh, thank you, Ken. It wasn't Roberta Williams. It was Jane Jensen.
Hmm.
That's who I spoke to, who did Mobius. Again, I've spoken to a lot of people, so I've forgotten a lot of names over the years. And yeah, I think that's, again, one of those things that kind of kept a lot, at least kept me from really being able to like a lot of these older school adventure games. And then,
Yeah.
as we saw in the early thousands, we kind of began to see that very big split. We saw, of course, again, the rise of Telltale and trying to make more adventure games mainstream. And then we
Hmm.
saw other developers. I think, what was it, the Book of Unwritten Tales, and a lot of like European adventure games going for, again, more of that classical. We're going to create some of the most insane puzzles you've ever seen. Try and solve them without a guide.
Yeah, I gotta say, I feel, at least in the direction I've taken with the Crimson Diamond, is I do want it to. If people complain that it's too easy, then I'll feel like it's a job well done. Um, Especially because it's a text parser game, which I guess we haven't really discussed yet. But the input method for the game for most of the commands is typing on your keyboard, "open door," "talk to woman," "ask man about fish," or something like that. So I know already that's a kind of a challenge and that's a big ask for people. So my goal has been to make it as easy to play as possible with logical puzzles because it's an input system that people are not used to anymore.
Oh yes, and as somebody who's a horrible speller, text parser has been one of those nightmares I've tried to avoid from the old school era.
Yes, exactly. There's some design kind of things to consider when when making a text parser game. One of which is, yeah, try to make it clear what the words would be that you would attempt.
Hmm.
But a lot of people have said that text parser games have helped in their childhood, helped them with typing, with spelling, with reading, all those types of things. Like it's kind of almost like an educational game. Educational game.
Let's see. What are some other comments we got here? It's always weird when we get a guest on who have a lot of fans. The chat moves so much faster than I'm used to when it's just like myself
Well, that's
talking. Yeah.
nice because I suck at multitasking. So as soon as I saw, like, I tried to put my the chat on my iPad, and I'm like, I can't. Like, I want to focus on what you're saying because I want to be able to talk properly.
All right. Ken asked, "How were you inspired to make the Crimson Diamond?"
I think I mentioned before that it started as an art project. It started with the visuals. I went to college for illustration, and I'm an editorial illustrator, which means I would illustrate for magazines and for newspapers. And so my training is very kind of art focused, is what I did. And I use Photoshop just about every day, even to this day, every day for the past 15 or 20 years, however long. Um, and so what I learned how to, but almost by accident, I learned how to make pixel art with the pencil tool in Photoshop at 320 by 200 resolution. And my first instinct was, yeah, oh yeah, I want to recreate some of that stuff I really enjoyed back in the day. And so I looked at old Sierra games and I started to make little rooms without any goal in mind, just little rooms, little pieces of furniture and rugs, and just started decorating them. And kind of from that, it slowly grew into a game project that I then started tinkering with Adventure Game Studio because I wanted to connect to rooms and I wanted, I started getting hallways and other rooms and I wanted to make a character walk around in the rooms. And so it kind of started just as like a complete visual art project. And this story kind of emerged slowly from me building the setting. So the setting came first, and the story came with me trying to rationalize what I'd already built.
Okay. Let's
Did
see.
that answer it? I hope that answered it.
And it's always amazing about like the kind of work that goes into like that kind of pixel art style. Like for me, it's of course why I really like the hand drawn aesthetic
Mm-hmm.
for a
Mm-hmm.
lot of games, and just like an animation in general.
Yeah. Oh, I'm 100% with you on that. It's so vibrant, and it's actually larger than life
Mm-hmm.
to make animation like that. And as opposed to 3D, I mean, it can be good and it can be great, but I think a trap people fall into with 3D is they try to make it realistic.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's not as exciting as making something that's bigger than life. And
Mm-hmm.
you can do that in 3D. Like my life drawing teacher in college, he'd say, you're basically trying to make, like when we do like sketches, like a 5-minute motion sketch or whatever, you want to make it more dynamic than what you see in front of you. We're trying to interpret that motion and sort of exaggerate and enhance that motion. And you get that more in 2D than you get in 3D.
Yeah.
Unless it's really fantastic 3D, like it can happen, but it just takes a lot of work.
Yeah, the uncanny valley effect is real for a lot of like CGI like animation these days, or at least it hasn't really seemed to have evolved that much. But
It's
yeah,
so hard to
yeah.
do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I don't even know if it's something I think is desirable to make something completely realistic.
Mm-hmm.
It can be, of course, like for special effects, sure. I mean, it's a really great tool to have, but to create people, like in that same way, I'm not a big fan of that use of the technology, unless it's for practical purposes, but otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
I much rather I like 2D art, I like 2D animation, and just in terms of development, yeah, it's great for indie developers who are just kind of doing it on their own or with a small budget and a small team.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Jeremy Dvorak, I won't butcher his name too much, asked, "What type of music is being used in this game, or what does Adventure
Mm.
Game Studio use?"
Well, Adventure Game Studio, I think it could pretty much use just about anything. The audio part is not my strong, but I love this question because it kind of it brings me around to talking about Dan, and Dan is the musician who's working on the game, Dan Polakar. And Dan is a huge adventure game lover, like myself. He's a huge fan of the genre, and he is using a Roland MT32 to make the music for the Crimson Diamond. And the Roland MT32 is basically it's a synth that Sierra wanted people to buy to fully experience the sound and music of their games, which was a big ask, and it certainly didn't catch on at the time because I believe Dan said that the Roland MT32 cost like $789 or something. But they wanted to cut a deal with the manufacturers, get the price down and package these with the games. And I don't know if that ever went through. But the sound of the Roland MT32 is it's the sort of the synth that the composers designed for. And most of us had Sound Blaster cards or AdLib sound cards on our systems. And it kind of gave an interpretation of what the Roland MT32 would do. But you'll find with a lot of Let's Plays now, people, there are kind of emulators for that sound with the Roland MT32.
Mm-hmm.
So what we get is we get to experience and enjoy the music like the composers actually had originally intended. So Dan had figured out he had to like figure out a way to run Windows 3.11 in DOSBox to work with the just you'd have to ask him. Actually, we did a live stream with Dan where he shows the process of actually composing some of the music for the Crimson Diamond. And we're going to do another one on Tuesday. So Tuesday, April the 14th, we're going to
Nice.
at 8 p.m. Eastern. He's going to be showing how he does that. And Dan he's a professional musician. He
Nice.
tours, he composes, he teaches. He does it all. But of course, with the current situation, he's no longer touring, which was like basically the biggest part of his income was touring.
Hmm.
He was touring with he is in Sean Paul's he's Sean Paul's keyboardist in a band called the Batabands, among other things. And so he'd go all over the world doing these things. Unfortunately, that's not no longer the case. So
Yeah.
he's really he's taking it as an opportunity to explore other ways of being a musician and being creative. So he's already done two original tracks for the Crimson Diamond. The theme, which you'll hear if you download the demo or watch the game. No, not the game trailer. That's old music. If you download the demo and launch the game, you'll hear the theme music. And he did the dining room cutscene about halfway through the demo is a waltz that he composed, and it's
Nice.
all with the Roland MT32, which some music. So it's a cross section of music nerd and adventure game nerd. That's good. That those are the people that will be really thrilled with it. I am thrilled with it too because it sounds like how I remember those games sounding. Although realistically, they never sounded that good when I played them because I didn't have a Roland MT32. But it's that's kind of the whole. That's the whole sort of vision of the game is we want to have a game that sounds like how you remember and it plays how like you remember, although it probably is going to be an improvement of things, but nostalgia, right? It's just going to be as you might have remembered at the time.
I think Dan is in the chat. He said, "Thanks for the glowing review."
Dan is, I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky that he took such an, because like I don't know anything about music. I think we already
Hmm.
mentioned that. And the fact that he took the initiative to figure out all this technical stuff, and we sometimes will have like test streams. We'll be, we've been doing those a few times a week just to try to straighten everything out with the levels, and he's trying to figure out all this technical stuff to make it sound good on our live streams. And I'm so lucky that he is motivated to do that because it's going to make the sound of the game really, really exactly what I want.
Hmm.
And so I'm really, really happy and lucky.
Great. Let's see. What are some other comments we got here? I think Ken asked. I think you may have answered this one earlier, but what was your favorite adventure game growing up?
Yeah, so there's a few. Like I loved The Secret of Monkey Island, the
Hmm.
EGA version. EGA being the same color palette that I'm using. It's also the version that I had. And I also, yeah, Day of the Tentacle. It's the puzzles in that are amazing. The voice acting is amazing. The art is amazing. That one. I would also say Colonel's Bequest for the art and for the game design. I think that was ahead of its time. And I was like, I really should keep a list on me for adventure games because there have been. I mean, it's my favorite genre.
Hmm.
Um, I like yeah. You talked about Katie Hallahan, and she's in Phoenix Online Studios. I love The Last Door season 1 and season 2.
Oh yeah.
That's fairly recent, but those were wonderful. Kind of when you talk like pixel art, it kind of is almost pixel art to the extreme
Hmm.
because the pixels are like the chunkiest pixels you've ever seen on a screen, and the art style was a great choice for the type of game they were making. So love that one.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's oh man, I think I mentioned, yeah, like I also love like the adventure game studio stuff. Gonzalez did some stuff. Yahtzee Croshaw made some adventure game studio games too, and I love those because yeah, they showed me what was possible.
Yeah, and like I said, like the independent space has really like took that ball when it came to the adventure game
Hmm.
genre and ran with it over the last 10 years. It's
Yep.
been it's definitely been fantastic to see the variety and like you said, like just so much you can do in terms of storytelling in that space. And we've seen that with either the old school adventure games, visual novel style games, you
Yep.
name it. I'm sure there's probably a few people watching this right now who have thought about or making something along those lines.
I love the fact that we have all these tools now that
Hmm.
we didn't have that make it so much easier. And you mentioned, like visual novel, like Ren'Py is a big visual novel one.
Hmm.
Twine, which is great for
Yes.
parser games. I'm a huge fan of. There is a game development engine called Adventuron that Chris Ainsley is making, and it's a text parser engine, but you can have art in it as well. You can use it in browser, and you can develop games that work both on PC and on mobile at the same time. And to my understanding, it's pretty easy to do because I just judged a game jam for Adventure On, and there were a few people who said this was my first time ever making a game, and you couldn't tell
Yeah.
because it was just that good.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I love the fact that you know we talk about back in the old days with these things. Like you think about a time when there were mainframe computers that people you could only use if you were in NASA or the
Mm-hmm.
military or in very select universities, and people were making games on those still. But now anyone that has you could have a phone, you could have you could be doing it in the library on a browser. Just these opportunities that have lowered the barrier of entry, and what we're seeing is this explosion of unique games with these unique perspectives that we've never seen before.
Yep.
And to me, those are the games that are most exciting for me is the ones that are built by small teams. And I watched a few of your live streams, and you mentioned Return of the Obra Dinn, Lucas Pope.
Mm-hmm.
We have World of Horror, which I think
Oh
you also
yes.
mentioned. Yep. And I've been playing The Longing, which I think is like a six-person
Oh
team.
yeah.
And it's amazing, isn't it? Have you played
Mm-hmm.
it?
Yeah, not my cup of tea. Again, it's a game. For
Mm,
those of you who don't know, it's a game that literally takes place over, I think, what 6 months or 3 months of
400. 400
400
days.
days of real time that you
Mm,
can play, and it changes based on what you do, where you are at certain events. Very interesting game, but not exactly one I have the time to play right now.
yeah, and I can totally see that for sure. But what's exciting is, yeah, this thing got made, and
Hmm.
and people are, people who like it. I think it's great, and these small teams just having this opportunity to share something that we've kind of never seen before.
Hmm.
And that's what excites me about these tools being so accessible and
Yeah.
um, it's not even just accessible to develop on, but they're also more accessible to play
Yep.
because indie games tend, as we mentioned before, tend to be much lighter weight in terms of like the tech requirements your computer needs. So I only right now I've got a Microsoft Surface Pro 2, which I think in its eighth year. It's doing great, but it can't play like the new stuff. It can only really play the small little indie things and it's great because that's what I enjoy playing anyway. But I think it's wonderful to have so many games that don't require, however many gigabytes of RAM that we need nowadays to play that new stuff, the big stuff.
Yeah. I mean, for the channel here, while I do play AAA games from time to time, I find that these days the games that interest me the most come
Hmm.
again from smaller studios, indie teams that are doing something very different and unique to it, as
Hmm.
opposed to, again, playing the umpteenth first person shooter
Yep.
and so on.
Well, I think it's a lot like what we see in the movie industry.
Hmm.
Is when you have a project that costs $300 million to make, you need it to appeal to everyone, like literally everyone, before you can turn a profit. And so what you need to do is you need to research about what it's more along the lines of what you think people will want, and it's not necessarily about what you want to express personally. So with a small team for indie games, you can say, well, I've got this idea and this is the story I want to tell. And at least for me, it's been a case of I'm not thinking necessarily about, well, at least for the story, what I think will please people or what will
Hmm.
sell the most.
Yep.
Sure, in the game design I'm very concerned with having it appeal to people and be something people as many people can enjoy. But the actual, as far as the content is concerned,
Hmm.
I'm not thinking about I need to sell 5 million
Yep.
copies of this, or
Yep.
I'm out on the street.
Yeah, and I think that's a very fascinating point. Something that we've talked about a lot when we have our design talks here about that line between playability and appealing to your fan base. Because I think that's another trap a lot of developers run into. That if you're so razor focused on the fan base and you ignore playability, then you end up with a game that kind of seems worse than the ones you're trying to emulate or the games you're trying to build off of. And you really have to strike that balance, I feel. Again, making something that somebody who didn't grow up playing adventure games or platformers or adventure or anything, and having them be able to get something out of it.
Yeah, I think, especially for indies, where indies are concerned, they have to start from well, they don't have to. I can't speak for everyone, but I think
Mm-hmm.
successful ones have to come from a place of love and passion. And this is, you want to
Mm-hmm.
create this thing. You want to bring something into the world that you have fond memories of that same kind of thing. And yeah, it's not necessarily about, well, okay, well, what the market research, well, what this segment wants, and this is the thing that's trendy right now. At least I'd like to think. Maybe I'm just being idealistic, but when you're working for hours on something by yourself, and there's maybe no hope of even turning a profit,
Mm-hmm.
it's important to you to have it exist, something that didn't exist before, that you think will give people
Mm-hmm.
the same feeling that the games you enjoyed gave you.
Yeah. And like we said, it is tough. I mean, for my regulars watching this, we have certainly at length and many times have spoken about the challenges of just making a simple game.
Yeah.
Somebody left a comment or like right at the start saying that their first title they made was a game based like on the Atari, and it took them forever to make.
Yeah.
And again, like for the new people watching, we do lots of design casts and dev interviews, and it's always fascinating to kind of see this process because I think one of the more interesting parts is that it's not something you would know otherwise. Like the
Mhm.
consumer side doesn't really understand the game development side. It's not a prerequisite by any means, but
Mhm.
it's just so much more challenging than I think a lot of people realize just to make even the simplest of video games.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. And for me, coming from the perspective of an art person who made my kind of living doing magazine and newspaper art, when I see something that I think is unfinished, or maybe not as a quality that I might
Mm-hmm.
expect of something, the first question I asked was, well, how much time did they get for this? How much money did they have to develop this?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, well, who was the client? Maybe the client had this feedback that they wanted it this way, and maybe you didn't want it that way. There's so many things that go into why a project turns out the way it does. So I think when people see, a game, any game that they think falls short in some way, I think it's important to keep in mind that there are so many barriers and obstacles to creating something, at all, whether it be good or bad,
Yep.
that you might want to consider, the reality of the situation. Is like, yeah, maybe you think this is a good game, but maybe they only had a year to make it. Or,
Yeah.
maybe this isn't a good game, but maybe they ran out of money and wanted to put it out because putting out was better than it, not happening at all. So I think a little bit of understanding would go a long way.
Yeah, and like for me, like the metric that I use a lot these days is what was the experience the developer wanted to achieve, and how close did they come to that? Again, like as somebody who plays so many indie games, I've stopped caring about art. Like I don't care if your game is pixel art or if it looks like Doom Eternal. Like that is not a metric I use to judge the quality of a game anymore. There's just so many more interesting variables to look at, and like you just said, just because a game was released doesn't mean that was the all-encompassing perfect vision. Nothing
Mm-hmm.
went wrong during development, and it's tricky, I think, for a lot of people to understand that when it comes to looking at these games.
Yeah, I think it's easy for people to criticize, and so this is the worst thing I ever saw, etc. And I think that if you haven't tried making something yourself, then I
Mm-hmm.
think I encourage it, because, like I said, the tools are so accessible that
Yep.
just seeing what that process is like, I think would go a long way to people kind of being more, empathetic toward developers, especially small ones.
Yep. And a few more comments from chat here. Okay, here we go. Jay Holmes asks, given that your background is in illustration and graphic design, how did you approach the writing, namely the dialogue, for all the characters of the game?
Yeah, so I gotta say, like, I've never taken a creative writing class, and I've never, or any type of screenwriting, anything like that. So the dialogue in the game is just, I just wrote it, I guess. um, I don't have any advice in that respect, except, read a lot of books. And I don't know. Unfortunately, I can't give any more insight than that. So if you like the writing and dialogue in the Crimson Diamond, I gotta say thank you so much. because out of any other aspect in the game that I've made, it's the one I have the least experience with, I would say. Because obviously the art, I went to college for art, and for the programming, I've been working on this thing on and off for a number of years, and I think I have enough tools and techniques under my belt that I can actually finish it using what I know right now from Adventure Game Studio. But this is the first dialogue I've written for anything, and it's the first story I've written since you know grade school or high school maybe. So all it is me trying to kind of look at all the characters as fully developed people who have experiences and they have reasons for being the way they are, and they have motivations for acting the way they do, and I try to keep that voice in my head when I'm writing for each person.
Yeah. And like for myself, like I when I was in high school, I was horrible at writing, and now I have two books I've written. Never did any video or audio editing, and now I'm using
Hmm.
Photoshop and Premiere. Like it's always
It's
you never,
beautiful.
yeah, you never know where things are going to go like that.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, nowadays, you can just, you're a writer. Who would have thought, right? But you are, you wrote books. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah. And let me see, what was the point somebody was saying? I just lost it in chat. Let's see. Oh yeah. What I was going to say, in terms of writing, like again, like going back to Watchet Eye, that's what kind of like really got me in love with Dave Gilbert's style. That I love the writing in his games.
Dave is great because Dave has been in the business for, I think he's run Wagedar for like 13 years, I think, or 13, 14 years, and they've developed just about as many titles. So Dave is like the elder statesman of
Mm-hmm.
sort of indie adventure games, and I got nothing but admiration and respect for him. He's running his own studio. He's publishing these things, and he's a huge inspiration for me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
he's figured it out, and I hope to to live his life one day.
We need to like I've been talking about doing more like round table cast like specific groups of developers. I would love to do like an adventure game one, kind of get everyone together.
Ooh, I'd love that. That'd be awesome. Yeah,
uh,
I love those guys.
mm-hmm. Ken asked, and I think this was from a few minutes ago. Again, chat is moving at least hyperspeed compared to what I'm normally used to. He asked, "What?" Let me see. Actually, that's another question. When it's really is moving fast. Okay, here he goes. He wanted to know what game specifically did you use as reference when you started your art project that you were talking about before? I guess
Yeah,
with the.
so
Yep.
yeah, it's the Colonel's Bequest,
Mm-hmm.
which is the first of the two Laura Bow mystery adventure games that were published by Sierra Online. It came out in 1989, and the art was by Doug Herring. He did all the art for it. And last year at PAX West, I actually got to meet Doug Herring. And he signed my big box of the Colonel's Bequest, which is just amazing. So I would say him. I would say his art, because he was able to achieve moodiness and kind of a spooky feeling in a game with like these colors. Like if you look
Mm-hmm.
at this, can you imagine? But you
Yep.
can, because I saw it. You can see it in his game, pulling the Crimson Diamond. You can get deep shadows, and you can get all kinds of wonderful color effects with the EGA if you figure out dithering and all the rest of it. So that was my main inspiration. I looked at his stuff more than any other stuff, really. Um, and it's the kind of art that always kind of always excited me. When I was illustrator, I kind of always gravitated toward bright colors, and I would do silkscreen printing for my illustrations. So the silkscreen printing process I would use at most maybe six colors. It's funny because back in the day, I've heard Doug Herring and Mark Ferrari, who done Maniac Mansion and Thimbleweed Park. They hated this palette. They hated the EGA palette because it was so restrictive. And they're all they're classically trained painters, classically trained artists. So this was nothing to them but a restriction. based on the technology of the time. But for me, I was actually doing silkscreen printing with 6 colors. So when I started doing this stuff with 16, I felt like it was like liberating in a funny way.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like, oh, this is exactly the kind of thing that I I want to make with so many more colors than I was ever used to using. And so that's where it all started. It completely all started from the art.
Yeah, and a strong aesthetic, I think, does so much for a game. It can really elevate it. We mentioned earlier World of Horror, which is a 1 or 2 bit
Yes.
style, and that is just haunting to look at some of the
Oh,
imagery that's in that game.
yeah. Same with Return of the Obra Dinn. That
Yeah.
same style of, and I think that's a really important way that indie games can distinguish themselves.
Yes.
Is the art style. I think it's so important. And maybe I'm just super biased because I'm an artist first, but the art is going to get people in the door, and the game will keep them there.
Oh yeah, we have said that line many times on these
Really?
design casts and
I feel
such.
good. I feel really good then because that is how I feel so strongly because you know if you don't catch people's eye and they're not immediately interested in that split second, there is this game is competing with thousands of other
Yep.
games that are being released, and that's maybe one of the downsides nowadays, to this greater accessibility to all these tools and
Mm-hmm.
greater accessibility, with the digital distribution. Anyone can put something up for sale. That is a drawback, is just discoverability, is people
Yes.
finding it. So having something that catches the eye, I think, is so important and cannot be overlooked. I know a lot of indie game devs start as programmers first, and so the idea that the art is going to be this immense extra cost, I can understand why that would be intimidating, and you feel like maybe you might not want to spend money on that.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like it is super super important.
Yeah. And it is tough, like you just said. Like art can be very expensive, even
Mm-hmm.
like the most basic style you can think of. And there is such that again, like there's always that spectrum of quality. Like I brought up pixel art earlier. I have played some amazing looking pixel art games,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm unfortunately I played some that look worse than the Nintendo era in terms of their style. And
Mm-hmm.
like we've said, a lot of people are going to judge a game immediately on the look.
Yep.
And when we say look, we don't necessarily mean your game must look like Doom Eternal or Resident Evil
Right.
3. We mean it has to stand out. And
Yep.
for the new people who are watching us right now, during the Steam Spring Festival that happened about 3 weeks ago, the time of the stream, I looked at about 70 indie games in the span of 1 week. And again, that line in terms of how a game can look is infinite. Like I've seen some amazing titles, and I saw some that just like within minutes, it's like I'm done. Like I don't want to play this game anymore. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, it's something that you have to say these days as a consumer because there's a good 50 to 100 games being released daily, maybe even
Mm-hmm.
more than that. And if the game doesn't catch your eye immediately or it doesn't have something that's going to hook you, people are going to move on to the next.
Yep. Yep. When I was I showed at Adventure X, and there is a game they're showing called Ladderhead. And Ladderhead, the art is extremely simple. Like it looks like MS Paint art,
Mm-hmm.
but the guy has such a natural aesthetic that it works, and it looks really cool. So I agree with you that it doesn't have to look like Doom Eternal or God of War to catch the eye.
Yeah.
It just has to be like a little bit different. It could be a little bit weird. The developer of Ladderhead said that he has not had any art training, but at this point he's a little scared to get art training because the way it looks right now, like the art is just perfect for what he's trying to achieve.
Yeah.
Um, and at EGLX, I met a developer who was making the art, and he wasn't an artist, and he was making that for his game. And I thought it looked great. I think it was perfect for what he was going for. And that's something that people tend to overlook too. Is your art for the game and the design of the game, like if those are hand in hand,
Yes.
um, then that is magic. That's where the connection is, and you are the person who will know exactly what your game is and what visual it requires. So it's either a matter of you just kind of figuring out a way to make that visual yourself or being able to direct someone else to do it.
Yeah.
But I found that art, like this guy thought, oh, I'm not really sure. I'm kind of just happy with it now. The art, and I'm like, this is perfect. This is exactly, you know what you want. You know what you want this to look like.
Yeah. And like we've said before in these casts, like when it doesn't match, then it makes the game look a lot cheaper than it might
Yep.
have otherwise been.
Yep.
And you mentioned The Last Door earlier. I think that's a really good example, again,
Mm-hmm.
of the art and the gameplay working.
Yep.
Like, it is not a complicated game. It's not like a
No.
very high quality graphical game to look at, but it fits with what they're trying to do.
Yes, 100%. The look of that game fits perfectly. The pixels are super chunky. The people don't even have faces,
Yeah.
but that is perfect for what they're trying to achieve with this kind of gothic horror, this unspeakable horror. The idea that the stuff that's happening, you project your own feeling onto
Mm-hmm.
that blank face, and that blank face is part of what makes that atmosphere so compelling. It's fantastic. It's a
Yeah.
fantastic example of just being more limited maybe, and just you can make this art quickly, which means more cheap. But if you know exactly what you're going for, if you're very clear about what you want, then it takes less time, which means it requires less money. When I was an illustrator, that's what I never like to hear is when people say they don't know what, because
Mm-hmm.
then you spend so much time figuring out what they want. If you know what you want and you can give as much detail as possible, that will make it cheaper in the end because you
Mm-hmm.
need to spend less time figuring it out. Like you
Yep.
shouldn't ask the artist to figure that part out. Like you should have that figured out already. And
Yeah.
the same goes for music. I don't know anything about music, but I told Dan, well, okay, it's Canadian. I wanted to give like a folk tune sound. It's a mystery. It's the 1914 era. So we kind of have this idea. He has an idea of where I want to be with that. Even though I can't actually describe the music, I can give him as much information as possible so he can do his job faster than kind of noodling around with just about everything.
Yeah. And just like when I spoke with voice actress Sally Beaumont, like we were talking about adding voice acting to a game and how you wanted to match what you're going for with that title, and that just I think really applies to any kind of aesthetical elements that go into a
Mm-hmm.
game.
Yep. I met Sally actually. I met her at Adventure X. Hi, Sally. If Sally's watching, she's cool. um, yeah, it's that's another good thing about me doing the art and the coding is that sometimes I'll go back and redo stuff that I felt wasn't quite working, and I probably wouldn't do that if I was contracting someone to do that or paying them by the animation.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but if you have an idea in your head of how it wants to look, and go back and redo it. But again, don't get wrapped up and just stuck, not moving forward. I got to keep reminding myself.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Definitely, and again, that's always that challenge when it comes to any kind of dev or especially a solo dev of just getting stuck in the weeds. I felt the same way when I was writing my book. Like, I would just keep going over the same
Mm-hmm.
section again and again, and at some point I was just like, I just have to just say it's done. Don't look at it anymore. Move on
Yeah,
to the next thing on your list.
yeah, yeah. I think it's a constant balancing act between what you're going to spend your time on. When it's an independent project, whatever it is, if it's writing a book, if it's making a game, you have to balance, moving forward with refining and with also promoting as well. These are all things that have to get done to give
Yep.
your project the best chance. But it's always like you can't do everything at once. You have to pick when and how long you're going to be doing something, and that's the
Mm-hmm.
tricky part for
Yep.
sure.
Definitely. A few more comments in chat, and also while I'm pulling this out as a quick time check, we are just under an hour and 20 in terms of the stream.
Are you serious?
I know. Again, time has no meaning here. We can,
No, no,
if,
you're right.
but I want to ask you, we certainly have comments, and we haven't even really gotten to the Crimson Diamond yet. Would you feel
Oh my god.
comfortable in terms of, uh, I guess, as a soft stop point now?
Oh, and then go um,
Yeah.
to just stop completely, or just start talking
To
specifically.
probably start to wrapping things up, I mean, in terms of the cast.
Oh,
Again, we could sit here for like another 2, 3 hours easily.
I was a little concerned actually because I told you an hour before we
Yeah.
started. Just in case, I said hour and a half. Oh my gosh! I even have like a discussion about narrative branching choices that the Clockwork Bird guys brought up the other day.
Hmm.
That I was feeling like, oh, if we run out of stuff to talk about, I can bring this up. But apparently, we don't have to worry about that. So
All right, I guess we'll just play it by ear then and see where things go. If we start to get, I think around like the 2 hour mark, we may have to.
okay,
We'll see how we'll sum things up. We'll try and we'll make a decision at that point.
I'll leave it up to you. Whenever
Oh,
you want to go, it's all
all
good.
right. Let me see. Ken asked this. I think we have two questions from him. Where to go? One was, what's your newest favorite adventure game?
Hmm. It might be Oberdin.
Mm-hmm.
It might be Oberdin. There's something about Return of the Oberdin I haven't even finished it yet.
Yeah,
In
me
fact,
neither.
I can't play it on my machine because my SP2 is just it gets all like sad and hot, and the fan starts going. So I can't really play it on the machine, my current machine. But I've played it a bit, and there's something about. I mean, it's a 3D game. I don't even like 3D games. I don't know what my problem is with this, but I don't know. It's so immersive, and the music and everything about it, and just the fact that the player has to be so active
Mm-hmm.
in what they're doing, and there's no prompting. It's just you, and you have to figure stuff out. And that active role, I find so
Yeah.
immersive. And the same thing with the Crimson Diamonds, like that active. I want it to be an active role. The
Mm-hmm.
text parser for me is a more active type of input than point and click stuff. And I love point and click stuff, but I've always felt with text parser games, I always felt more immersed because the illusion of limitless possibilities is there when you have a text parser.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I agree with you about the Oberdin. That it was like for the first time, at least for like me with my limited experience adventure genre, that it basically only moved at my pace. If I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to spend,
Yes,
half an hour on one scene trying to break it down, I could. If I wanted to just move on to another thing after 2 minutes, I could do that as well. The story was, and this is something that I've said a lot about some of my favorite stories in games. It's very low stakes. It's not
yes.
the end of the world is going to happen. You're just trying to detail notes down for however long you want to spend on it.
That you hit the nail on the head with the Oberdin. And I think that's one of the reasons I love it so much is taking the story at your own pace. Okay, can I tell you something really funny about the longing about that 400-day game?
Mm-hmm.
I am about at day 222, I think, last I checked, and I'm starting to get anxious because I'm like, the game's half over, and I feel like I'm being rushed now or something.
Mm-hmm.
That's how crazy I am about not wanting to be rushed when I'm playing a game. In fact, when I go to a restaurant, I will go on the website of the restaurant and see the menu before I go, so I don't feel rushed to order when I'm there. That is how much I dislike that rushed feeling.
Yeah.
Um, Colonel's Bequest had a mechanic where if you explored the house, you could stumble upon certain conversations that would advance the clock.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that really stressful because adventure game, I want to explore, and I don't want to feel like I'm being penalized for exploring.
Yes.
So in the Crimson Diamond, I designed it so that there's an in-game notebook, a lot like Thimbleweed Park, which is where I got the idea from. That it tells you what you need to do to progress the game. It tells you this is how you get to the next stage of the game. And if you don't do that, you can do anything else you want. And you don't have to worry about time. There's no in-game clock. There's none of this stuff. I like setting my own pace.
Yeah.
Just exactly. That's exactly the thing about the Oberdin is you set your own pace.
Mm-hmm. And like for my tangent, like I hate games that have real world timers to them. That the game
Mm.
only advances, or you must be playing the game at a specific time, or if you don't log on every day, something bad's going to happen. It's been, I think, a real killer for me for like the whole mobile genre of free to play
Mm.
games. I just, again, like I don't want to be told that I need to play this game at this time,
Yep.
especially for someone like me. Like I have all kinds of things to do with game wisdom and writing and stuff, so I have like very focused periods of time to play, but at like very weird hours. So I don't want to be told, oh, you need to sign on at 4 p.m. every day, or you lose out on all this great stuff.
Yeah, yeah. It's. I don't. It's nowadays now with our we can watch Netflix whenever we're not on TV schedules where we have to show up in front of the television at 8 o'clock to watch a thing. It doesn't happen anymore, and I don't think we are prepared to deal with that as much. At least I am not. You're not. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's and I think when I'm designing the Crimson Diamond, a lot of it is what I like about other games, but it's also what I hate about other games. And not wanting to do those things
Yeah.
because yeah, so much of that enjoyment gets lost for me. Like King's Quest 3 has an actual clock that's
Oh.
just running on the top of the screen, and I can't stand it.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. I think we may have caught up. I think. I think Ken asked. You want to know if you ever read anything like Agatha Christie? I guess when it came to like, I guess your inspirations.
Yeah, my mom read a lot of Agatha Christie books. We've got like a shelf of the old '70s paperback Agatha Christie stuff. I haven't read it in a long time though. I did read a few, and of course, I seeing the Murder on the Orient Express and what else was there? Some of like Knives Out was another one that's kind of a spin on that Agatha Christie style. Uh, I read them, but it's been ages, and I should probably go back and read them again because yeah, they're great little. They're not long. They're just a great little tightly written bits of mystery, and that episodic nature I really enjoy when it comes to mystery series. I'm actually watching right now. I'm watching Father Brown with my mom, and that's a good one too.
All right. I think that has us call to Jay Holmes' question about detective elements. We'll talk more about that as we talk more about the Crimson Diamond in general.
Oh,
If
hi
you
Jay Holmes. By the way, I recognize that person. So hi. Thanks for coming.
And for everybody else watching, if you are just tuning in, if you do have any questions for us about adventure game design or the Crimson Diamond, definitely feel free to get them in. We'll see where things go in terms of this cast. It's always fun. Again, like I tell the regulars here, no, we never keep to a set time. We will always it always runs long, no matter how well
Good.
we go. But uh, I guess to get a little to focus more on the Crimson Diamond itself. For people new watching us right now, live or recorded, what is this game? I guess in terms of its design, like what are you making in terms of as an adventure game?
Okay. The Crimson Diamond is an EGA text parser mystery adventure game, and it's set in Northern Ontario. You play geologist, mineralogist Nancy Maple, and you get sent up to Crimson, Ontario, which is a fictional town, a ghost town, to a lodge to investigate a diamond claim. So it's a very classic traditional style adventure game. It's a classic traditional style mystery story, and it's very story focused. I would say that tends to be the design. It's set up in a series of chapters. The first chapter is free on Steam, and then there will be about 7 chapters altogether. But it's all going to be released at one time when I'm finished it. After that,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah, that was like one of like the more interesting. So when I spoke with Dave about the Blackwell series and how it was originally intended to be one full game, and then due
Wow.
to financial and design constraints, he split that up into each chapter or each kind of
Mm-hmm.
story like that. And I thought that kind of style, I think, I always felt that lended itself really well to that kind of episodic formula.
Yeah, I actually am developing the Crimson Diamond in that in chapters almost like each segment I'm developing, and then I move on to the next one. Which I don't know about game design to know if that's not the right way to do it, but it just has come naturally because that's how I see the story.
Yeah.
So that's how I develop it.
I guess here's a question for you that I'm kind of curious about. With developing the Crimson Diamond, did the story come first, or did the design when you first started to get serious about making it?
Well, the art came first,
Okay.
and then the story came first, the second, and then the design probably came third. because I already had a bit of a framework because I'm basing it a lot on the design of the older games. But as I was developing it, as I started showing it at shows and watching people play it, I'd watch some Let's Plays. People have been awesome enough to Let's Play it, and so I always try to catch those if I can. Watching people kind of who've never played that style before has really influenced my design for the game, because I do want people to enjoy it that might not necessarily have played the style before. So I am keeping all that kind of stuff in mind in terms of trying to make the text parser more forgiving, and having, like, I have a tutorial room that walks players step by step through some of the more common commands. So people who have no background at all and hopefully can get a bit of instruction on how to actually interact with the game.
Mm-hmm.
Because to be honest with you, I think this style is something that nowadays, with our texting and typing all the time, we communicate so much with text now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the style of game, like, there's no reason why it can't come back. It's just a matter of trying to improve the design as I watch people play it. And that's the only way I can really improve the design is, watching people, get stuck or get frustrated and all that stuff. And it's been a big concern for me because I do want it to have the best chance. And it's not just from a sales standpoint. It's because I think the style is a great style, and I'd like to see more of it. And so that's kind of another reason why I want it to, be appealing.
Yep, and I think for developers watching, is I think no developer wants their game to repel people. They want people to obviously play through it, and it is hard. Like, again, like, we had a whole live show, I think, last week. We talked about playtesting and why it's such an important factor when it comes to these games.
Yeah. It's just some stuff that you wouldn't even consider. Like, the Sierra games, like how you move the character around on the screen was a simple, like, a certain way of tapping the arrow key once to move the character in a direction, and she'd just go in that direction. When you wanted to stop the character, you would tap the arrow key in the same direction. And when I designed the game initially, that's how I made the character move, because that's what those games had her move like. But as soon as I showed it at Wordplay, the very first place I showed it at, everyone was holding the arrow key down, because nowadays that's what people do. So I changed the default movement to that, holding the arrow key to move the character around, because that's what people were used to. So seeing that was so so educational, because I'd been stuck in this idea where, okay, well, this is what an adventure, this is how they play, this is what people expect, but no, that's not what they expect, because that was 30 years ago.
Yep, and I had that exact same conversation with Mark, and I if he's watching this, I apologize. I don't remember his name. The developer of Scold, that when they're developing these old school RPGs, that on one hand they're trying to bring that memory back, but again, on the other hand, there's so many UI weirdness and quirks, either due to the limitations of that system or just due to the design not evolving at that point, that if a modern player would sit down and play it, they would just be like, what the hell am I doing here? I don't want to figure this out. Now, we'll get to Jay's question in a second. I think this will be a perfect segue to it. But before that, in terms, again, like, we've been talking about story and difficulty with adventure games for the last hour and a half of this cast. In terms of the Crimson Diamond, what are you aiming at in terms of, I guess, complexity? Like, is this something for, the people who found Myst to be too easy, or is this aimed for more like of a general adventure game player?
So what my goal is, and I hope it's not too ambitious, but my goal is that people can enjoy it at a few different levels of complexity. So the first one being, you've never played a type of game like this before. You've got the notebook, and it tells you what you need to do. So that's your goal. And you do those things, and you get through the game from beginning to end. You get an ending, and you think, okay, that was great. It didn't take me that long to play this. Maybe 3 or 4 hours, maybe, and that's cool. And I got that story. But the extra level of complexity is there's more going on in the story than just the main story. There are, you need to, if you really want to play it at that higher level of complexity, you could learn about what the characters, what their motivations are. There's a few other things that are happening that you might want to learn about. And those things would reward a player who is more like detail oriented and more interested in really figuring out and following where people are going and listening to all the conversations and asking pertinent questions. Because the magic of the text parser is, when you want to ask someone a question, you have to ask them the question.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to do that, you have to read what they've been saying. You need to read their responses. And you can ask them questions that prompt more responses. And then as that goes, you can learn more about the setting, the story, that character themselves, and the reward for playing more intensively is more story, and that will hopefully inform the ending that people do get at the end of the game.
It kind of reminds me, as you're describing that, as a Her Story that came out a few years ago. Did you play that one?
I did not. No,
That
unfortunately.
that one had a text system. You were trying to look up information by watching video interviews with
Mm-hmm.
people, and so you would have to type in the word or the phrase to pull up like a video or a scene that
Mm-hmm.
referenced it. And again, it was entirely very low stakes, and it left it up to you again to kind of figure out how much do I want to get into this. And
Yeah.
it's the same thing as Obra Dinn.
Yep.
I got like when I finished, I got like the worst ending possible. You're like 80% of the book was not finished at all, and it's like, well, do you want to play it again? And you want to see if you can figure out more? Like, I'll try. And no, I got completely stumped.
Yeah, that's definitely sort of the design I want to go for, because not everyone plays these things the same way, and I
Hmm.
especially learned that from watching people. Like some people, they open up every drawer they will,
Yes.
some people, they sit and ask people all the questions they can think of, and some people just want to get through it. They want the story, and I think all those are valid, and I want it to be enjoyable at all those different levels. Um, and I know you talked with the Clockwork Bird guys about narrative branching
Yep.
choices. And yeah, I tend to agree with them in that, when you've got a small team and you do want to eventually finish the game, you can't really do too many branches and you can't do them too early on. But there will be some, different endings of my game,
Hmm.
because there's kind of like a balance between telling the story that you want to tell, like this telling the story I want to tell, versus player freedom, right? And I
Yep.
think there's always going to be that interplay. And I gave a talk at my college, actually, in a game design course about this exact thing. And I kind of, what I use as an example is like the Three Little Pigs story. Like if you're going to make a game of the Three Little Pigs, and the Three Little Pigs has kind of like a narrative arc where the build up is the straw house and the wood house and then the brick house and then whatever, etc. No spoilers, right? But if you give the player ultimate freedoms, like what if they go to the brick house first, right? And then you don't have any, you don't see that story. You don't actually see what the author intended. So when you have a game that's really narrative focused and very story based, there's only so much branching you can do before it's
Hmm.
all the player's off all the way into like the weeds, right? And they're not in the story that you actually want them to experience for the most part. But you do want to give them a sense of control, and that's where the levels of understanding and interrogation and investigation come in.
Yeah. And the other challenge, of course, with player freedom is if you give them too much freedom too early on, they won't really know what they should be focusing on, what
Mm-hmm.
they're
Mm-hmm.
trying to achieve. And I've ran into that many times
Yeah.
with like the 4X genre, with a lot of the open space games, where it's just basically,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to put you in the universe, do whatever you want. And I'm like,
Yep.
I don't know what this game is. I don't know what I want out of this game yet.
Yes. Yeah, I thought a lot about that when I was developing the slice of the game, the demo that you can play. I didn't want to overwhelm people with this new style of game, this new game. How do I play this game? So in the first chapter, if you play it, is restricted to the interior of the lodge only. There are grounds outside of there where you can explore, and there's some other places you can see. But for the demo, you're only in the house. And in the demo, your only goal is, well, for the first part of the demo, is just to talk to everyone. So talk. And so what that does is, when you talk to everyone, you introduce yourself. So she goes, "Hi, my name is Nancy Maple," etc., and she tells you why and she tells the other characters, and in turn, she's telling the player who she is and what she's there for. And she does that like 8 times, I think. There's 8 other characters to introduce yourself to. So by the time you're halfway through the demo, you have a pretty clear idea of and that's even if you skipped the intro, because I have an intro animation sequence that I'm sure people skip. It's a work in progress anyway, so no hard feelings if you skip it. But I designed it so that the player gets a very clear idea of who you are, what your goal is, and as a natural part of coming to the lodge at night and having to introduce yourself to people before dinner. And so for me, that the story purpose and the game purpose were the same in that way, at least in the beginning.
Okay. And to Zach's question, he wanted to ask, have you ever played the Journeyman Project or a Daedalus Encounter growing up?
I have not played those, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I stick to the main ones.
I may own the Journeyman, one of the Journeyman games from GOG again, but I have not played a lot of those games on there. I think I still have I have no mouth and I must scream to play at some point.
Yes, I have played that one. That's a good one. That's a really good one. It's not a fun time, but it is a good one. And Harlan Ellison had such involvement in it that it's just it's flawed, and it has a bit of some technical issues here and there, but it's definitely worth playing.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe someday I'll be able to get around to that one.
Oh yeah, that's the song that we all sing in our hearts someday. We look at the GOG library or the Steam library, and someday I'll get around to the.
And I think this is a good time to pull up or to bring up Jay Holmes's question from earlier. He wanted to know more about the detective elements in the Crimson Diamond.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the first part is, asking people about questions, so that sort of interrogation, investigation technique, listening in on people's conversations. So for the demo, those are the two basic detective-y style things you'll be doing. But after the demo, there's an opportunity to do other sort of detective-y / geologist mineralogy style types of actions. So you will be, you'd take some rock samples here and there, and you'd have to investigate. I don't necessarily want to spoil, but there's a fingerprint mechanic that people will be using to progress through the game a little bit. So there are some other things that those are the main ones so far in the game that in development. But as for the demo, it's just the two, like listening in on people's conversations. Questions for the most part are the two, but there will be more in the full game.
And like we were talking about with the Obra Dinn, like that kind of like investigation aspect, I think that's something that's missing from. Like I would like to see more adventure games kind of tackle again that putting the player in charge of what they find out about. I think, and like I was saying earlier with her story, I think that's what kind of attracted me to that game as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was talking to a few of the other exhibitors at Adventure X about this, and about it's a narrative, it's a showcase of narrative games, and so I was saying, these are very 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 story based games, so why don't we just all write books and short stories and things, and what's the difference, if we want that, and I said that it's a matter of controlling, like, when the discovery of new information is in a narrative game. I think that's like a huge thing, that feeling that the player is discovering new things, and when that happens, it makes the game. Because in a book, you go through the pages and there's no control there, and there's no choice. But in a narrative game, you are that person in a very direct way. And when you learn something new, then it's that draws you in more, and you feel active in that instead of passive.
Yeah. And to Jay Holmes' comment there about less puzzles, more discovery. With the Crimson Diamond, again, we've had a lot of discussion about puzzle design in other adventure games. Are there any puzzles, either in traditional or more esoteric sense, with the Crimson Diamond?
There are puzzles. Like there are processes, kind of work your way through. But I did try to make them as logical as possible, knowing that in order for the player to generate those actions on their own is kind of challenging anyway. So I've had I've had a tester say that the puzzles are tough but fair, which I'm pleased with. But I actually was hoping that people would complain that they were too easy. So apparently there are puzzles that exist that people are challenged by. Although sometimes when people do get stuck, I do try to smooth that out a little bit.
Yeah. And puzzles, I mean, that's another hour and a half, I think, easily. If we really wanted to get on that topic, because it is such a very challenging aspect when it comes to these games. And like you said, like there's always that difference between like the logic-based puzzles that take place like within the universe, and
Mm-hmm.
then developers take something from like we're going to make you solve a tic-tac-toe puzzle,
Oh my
or
goodness.
we're going to do Towers of Hanoi for the
I
8,000th
was
time in a
I was
game.
gonna mention that. Yeah. Oh my. Yeah, the tile sliding puzzles and
Oh God.
yeah.
I think last summer I played the Seventh Guest for the first
Oh
time,
yeah.
and like that was just a nightmare. Like a friend, he sent me the solution to it. It was like a chess puzzle that had nothing to
hmm
do with chess. It was
hmm
like an 800-word solution to this puzzle. I'm like, how the hell was I ever going to figure that one out on my own?
No, no, you're not going to. But it's funny because some people are good at those things. I've never been, so I never would have considered putting, sliding tile puzzle in the game. I don't even. Here's the thing: is I don't even know how to program. So even if I wanted to, I couldn't. So another kind of the flip side of those, like the crazy like puzzles, is the games where you have to like find stuff. Like what are they called? Find object
Hidden
puzzles
object.
games. Hidden object games,
Mm,
which is a completely other genre, which
mm-hmm.
I think are pretty cool. But like I can't do that really at the resolution that I'm working at,
Mm,
which is 320 by 200. Everything is kind of blocky.
yeah.
So that's definitely not a thing either. So basically, my stuff is more logical, like stuff that I would consider the player would logically need to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the hidden object. Like I know if you've heard of the studio Arfix Mundi, they typically make like to me they seem to make like the best examples of like those
Mm.
hidden object games, and they also do a lot in terms of again, I don't know if I would call them logical or in-universe puzzles. Like they did like the same. They do a lot like those. You must match all these icons and move them around so they're in the proper position. You need to
Yeah,
get the pipes to connect in the right
some
way.
people like that kind of thing, you know. And I think it's great because then there's a game. There are tons of games like it. And I think it's not really my thing, but it can be soothing. Like I sometimes I see let's plays of the hidden object games. Like I actually watch let's plays. I'm not even playing the hidden object game, but I'll watch them. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? This is maybe I could do this. This could be a fun thing to play. And it's awesome that we have these options because
Mhm.
maybe I will at one point because they are kind of cool. They look beautiful too.
And the chat is talking about buying all like the hint books back in the day. This is a good This is good why I. It's a good thing I didn't play these games as a child because I would have gone broke buying all those hint guides. The only.
Oh no, I mean I'm thinking also about the hint line that
Oh yeah, someone mentioned
yeah.
that too. The nice thing was I emailed Interplay one time for help for Alone in the Dark, and they sent me the written guide to the game,
Oh wow.
and that was
Well, that's
great. I didn't have to pay anything for that. They just gave it to me. It was
oh
great.
that's beautiful. I love it. Yeah,
Uh,
nowadays, you can just Google and stuff, and there's a walkthrough. It's
uh,
nice. I kind of, that's something that idea where, that information is just not freely available, so you're only stuck with what you have. And
mm.
that's bad, but it's got there's a little something, there's a little mystery there that we just are never gonna have.
Jeremy asked, "Are there any dead ends in the Crimson Diamond where you can progress and have to go back to an earlier save or start over?"
I'm gonna hope not. As I've designed it, no, but there could be a bug that will do that, in which case, please report it as soon as possible so I can fix it. But yeah, it's not something I'm going for. I like I said, a lot of the game design is dictated by what I don't like as much as what I like in these games, and that's a definite no-no for me. If you do something that will kind of stop you from progressing in the game, then you'll probably just die. There are a few deaths, but they're kind of hard to achieve, or there you get plenty of warning. Um, because I know some people enjoy, and I kind of enjoy bizarre like ends for people. So I never liked them as a kid, but they are fun. I gotta admit that they are fun. So I do add a few of those occasionally, for fun, just for fun, not for any other reason. So you could well, I won't spoil any, but they're there.
Let's see. Jay Holmes brought up on the headline for Quest for Glory, and that actually made me think of another thing I wanted to ask you about. Did you ever play the Quest for Glory series? I remember buying that one way back in the day, and that had like more of an RPG aspect to it. I always found that very
Yes.
fascinating because, as we said, like adventure game designs are typically very linear in their approach. But that was like the one I only heard of back in the day that you could build a warrior and have warrior solutions or have magic solutions and so on.
Yeah, and I can't believe I didn't mention that. People asked me what my favorite adventure games were because yeah, Quest for Glory 1 and Quest for Glory 2. I also my second favorite genre is RPG. So for an adventure game to have RPG is like a dream come true. And that yeah, it's they are fantastic games, and they're beautifully designed because yeah, like you said, you can be a warrior, you can be like a wizard, you could be a thief, and there are different puzzle solutions based on those things. You could be a blend of those things too. You could be like a warrior with a bit of magic and stuff like that, and so you could have a number of different solutions open to you on how to solve puzzles. Those were also hugely inspiring for me. They have day night cycles in the game, like time does pass, which is also um,
Hmm.
a huge way of making the game feel like it's on an epic scale when it happens over days, because a lot of the early games, King's Quest, Space Quest, they kind of all are like they exist in like this timelessness where it seems like it's just one long day, however long it is. um, but of Quest for Glory, they actually there's daytime, there's nighttime, and I actually have day and night cycles in the Crimson Diamond too. I feel like for a game that's so based around the setting, like having that extra change of tone for when it becomes nighttime
Hmm.
is like a cool little twist because characters move around, they go to bed at night, they do different things, and depending on the night and day. And from an art perspective, it was really cool to do like nighttime versions of the screens that I've done. So it's something that they didn't really have in any of the adventure games that at least from like the late 80s, early 90s, the ones that I enjoyed the most. They didn't have that until like yeah, Quest for Glory was the one that did it, and I think it's fantastic. Those games are wonderful.
Yeah. And I saw this comment came up a few minutes ago. Oh, here's Chad Armstrong asked, any thoughts about having a small arcade sequence in the game?
Hi Chad, by the way. Thanks for coming. Um, no, and it just as with a lot of other things. There's a few that one is I don't know how to do that, and second of all is I don't like them. Um, I actually recently played Conquest of Camelot, which is another Sierra game, like another text parser Sierra game from that time. One of the ones I just had never gotten to play back in the day, but thanks to the magic of GOG, I was able to buy and play through, and it held up. I was kind of scared because I heard how hard it was to play, but the only parts that really got me stuck, I managed to eventually get past them, but were the arcade sequences. There were a few in the game, and there were genuinely times in that game where I thought I can't finish this game now because of this thing, and I don't want anyone to ever feel like that when they play my game. Is the idea that okay, well, there's this arcade sequence and it's really laggy and it's kind of not working that well, and it's anyone's guess what when I need to do what I need to do, and that is another big thing is yeah, like people, some people, they for whatever reason they can't have those reaction times. Like I was never good at reaction time stuff.
Hmm.
um, for the reading speed, it's like the dialogue boxes, they're going to stay up for as long as you need them to stay up, right? Because people read at different speeds. And maybe you have to get up and go get a drink or something, come back. You don't want the text to go by you. And I'm
Yeah.
always very clear when there's a cutscene. You can press escape to exit the cutscene, but you can't accidentally press anything else to get out of the cutscene.
Hmm.
Um, and also in terms of accessibility, it's I have some text parser shortcuts in the game too, some shorthand. So if some people have difficulty typing on the keyboard, just physically they have difficulty. So for instance, open door can be performed by O space D, and then you
Okay.
press enter. It does the same thing. And there's a list of them in the demo. If you type in help H, you can get. Although I've since improved it. There's a new demo version I need to get at some point. But there are some text shortcuts that people can use for, if either you don't like typing or you have trouble typing, just make it easy. It's all about making it easier for people to play.
Mm-hmm. All right, Roberta, thanks for coming out to the stream. Hope you enjoyed things. And yeah, if you want to mention me to the Hero U developers, that would be great. Because we're having all
Yes.
kinds of discussions in chat there. And Zach wanted to ask, did you ever play the NES game Deja Vu, which was like a very old school, challenging adventure game way back in the day?
No, but I will say that when I showed my game at EGLX, I was asking, you know, does this game remind you of any other game? There's a few people who said, I think maybe some people said Deja Vu. Some people said Clock Tower, which a game I haven't before. But yeah, like that's the kind of idea. So I immediately like started looking at games and everything because yeah, to me I don't know them, but if it excites some kind of memory that would possibly encourage you to look into my game, then that's awesome.
Great.
Deja Vu, I could write that down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I've heard of, never played that one as well. I guess here is a question for you and for the chat, because I know we have a lot of adventure game fans watching us or watching these are live recorded. What kind of puzzle game, or are there any kind of puzzles that you just cannot solve in an adventure game? Like it's your blind spot when it comes to the genre.
Ooh,
While you're
that's a good
thinking, I'll
question.
give mine. I
Okay.
cannot do musical based puzzles. Anything
Oh my
that involves,
goodness.
listening to tunes or
Hmm.
recreating songs, I can't do that.
Yeah, that's not my favorite. There's some kind, in Conquest of Camelot, there was a puzzle where you had to walk across a frozen lake, and there's an inventory item you can get to help guide you across the frozen lake. Because there obviously when you step in the wrong part, you can fall through. And even with the inventory item to not fall through the frozen lake, I found it extremely, extremely hard not to fall through the frozen lake. So any type of pathfinding like puzzles, like going up the staircases and like the old adventure games, and try not to walk off a cliff. Those I don't. I'm just not good at them. I can get by eventually, but it's just the most stressful, thing I ever really. So I'd have to say those. I'm not good at pathfinding puzzles where you just have to rely on again hand-eye coordination, which I never had.
Hmm. Stair Quest. Yeah.
Stair Quest, yes, I recommend that. I think it's free and it's like my nightmare. It's just a bunch of stairs you have to go, like different kinds
Oh
of
no.
stairs. It's wonderful. I have watched the Let's Play, and that's as close to it as I forget.
One question I had about the text parser. Again, as somebody who is not good when it comes to spelling generally, how I guess open is the text parser to the game? Like, is it going to be a case if I spell like one letter off, the game won't recognize it, or are there any like accommodations for people like that?
Um, I will say that um, nothing for like misspelled words. I don't have any accommodations for mis. But like for instance, if you call like a cupboard a cabinet, that should work. And like I try to add synonyms to stuff.
Okay.
Um, but I'm wondering if I should try to have a few common misspellings of things, because it is true. I mean, the spelling is tricky. But okay, what it would probably do to the word list, I'm not sure.
Yeah. I guess
But it's something to consider.
I guess here's like another like interesting question. I think this is something that I think is more akin for like adventure games, or especially for like text heavy games. Will the game be localized into different languages?
um, I, I've had a few people approach me about this, and what I say to them is, at some point, I'd love that to be something I can. If the game does well enough in English that I could actually look at localization in other languages as feasible, that would be like a dream come true.
Hmm.
Um, but at this point, like, yeah, it's just me. I'm
Yeah.
just living off my savings until I finish this thing, and hopefully I can make some money. It just it's a matter of cost of localization. It's not even just the cost though, because I've had some people to localize. Um, it's the writing. I I don't know. I weirdly feel like protective of the writing, and the tone and all that. And I when I don't, I wouldn't know the other language, and I wouldn't know what it's saying. Is that weird that I
Hmm.
feel uncomfortable with the idea?
Mm.
Even
Yeah,
it's
again,
so
it's
text based, you know.
yeah, and there's always, of course, that risk, like how a phrase can be translated into another language as well.
Yeah, I just when that's like a huge blind spot for me, and um I don't know because like with an adventure game, like I said, all it is it's art and it's writing for the most part. There's no other mechanics to it really beyond that. Like that's the basic of it, and sort of there is a lot of writing in it too. Um, so I don't anticipate it. Like, people ask me about voice acting too, for the game, and that's another one where it's like a cost thing, but also it's an era specific thing because like the EGA games never had voice acting because they were on floppy disks and that wasn't possible. So that's not happening. But yeah, the localization is a tough one. I feel like if there was enough demand for it, and I feel it would be worth it, I would look into it. But just as with like the question of like would it ever platforms, I'd love it to be playable on iPads and stuff like that, with a keyboard and things. Um, but it's something that yeah, it's a problem I would like to have that decision. But at this point, I'm just going to be launching on PC in English.
Okay. Zach, want to know if you ever play any of these Scribble Knots games that were just like all text parser. You can type whatever you want and it generates it.
I've been intrigued by those. I know those played them, but maybe I'll check that out.
All right. I guess we are officially at 2 hours. Again, we didn't think we
Oof.
would get this long, but that's how these things turn out. I think we'll begin to wrap things up in the next few minutes. So, for the people watching us live right now, if you have any final questions about the Crimson Diamond, adventure game design, whatever, please get them in now because this will be the official last call for it. For you, Julia, in terms of the game, are there any other aspects regarding the design or development that we didn't touch on yet?
Oh boy. Ooh, that's a hard one. Well,
I'll
I
say,
will say that it's sort of it's a you play Nancy Maple and you're a mineralogist and a geologist, like a rookie one, and that got involved because that's sort of one of my sort of areas of interest. So I've kind of tried to put in some bits of sort of trivia and education about how someone might conduct field work, like very basic field work and that type of thing. So that's an aspect of it too, because as I was developing the setting, it was a matter of, like I said, rationalizing why there would be a lodge and nothing else kind of near the lodge, like no other part of the town, because I wasn't thinking about the story in relation to a whole town, just a lodge, because I wanted that Agatha Christie mystery vibe. Um, so I came upon the idea that Crimson, Ontario was a ghost town, and so I actually have an interest in local history too. So I have a book called Ghost Towns of Ontario, or something like that. And what you get is to read the history of a bunch of places and why towns got settled and why they got deserted and all that. And because it's Canada, a lot of that is wrapped up in natural resources. So which was a natural in for my like geology, and I was able to, say, well, diamonds are a big mystery trope, like these precious gems, get people all excited and gets the greed out in people and gets, it gets um, the motivation factor for characters to travel up north. And so what I did with the story is I made it easy on myself because I made the research about stuff I'm already interested in learning about. So I guess that's another aspect of it that we didn't get to discuss.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it's always interesting about like trying to add like your own personal interests, or trying to teach someone about a style or a job that we normally don't get to see. Because it's always that. I think that's always one of the more challenging aspects of adventure game design, that we've seen some developers go for like real world related puzzles. Like famous game would be like chemistry solutions or chemistry related puzzles. And if the audience isn't familiar with that or don't understand like the slang or whatever it has to do with it, those puzzles can become very difficult for somebody.
Yeah, so I try to keep it really simple for for players, because like I don't know a lot about it either. Or I should try to at the most basic level of these things. Although I do like to put in like rock facts and trivia, because Nancy's enthusiast, so she likes to share that information with people whether they want to hear it or not. Um, I do have a like an online news called the Crimson Gazette that I put out every month, and it sort of covers a bit of development or like podcasts that I'm on, and it always ends with sort of like a rock fact. Sometimes it's an Ontario mineral fact, general fact, or a piece of new rock news or something. Because again, it's my interest, but I like to give it, I like to give that flavor. So if people are interested, if you go to thecrimsondiamond.com, which is, I don't know, that's legible there, but thecrimsondiamond.com, there's a newsletter you can sign up for if you want to learn more rock facts and sort of share my love of the mineralogy and the geology. And the history actually really helped with the setting, because it makes the story kind of feel more fleshed out. And actually, the research also helped with doing puzzles and puzzle design too. So it really goes along with it. The trouble is knowing when to stop, just buckle down and actually develop.
Mm-hmm. I gotta ask, did you ever see the series Over the Garden Wall that was on like Cartoon Network from a few years ago?
Yes. So it's the two little kids, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's beautiful.
The kids said a lot about this. That's a rock fact,
Yes.
and that's where I got that from.
Yeah, that's a rock. Exactly. Yeah. I think I stole it from that. I don't know if I called it a rock fact in the newsletter, but that's definitely what I'm thinking. Yeah, that's a beautiful, beautiful series.
Oh yes. Also, another tangent. I really like Infinity Train that they aired, I think, lately too.
What is it called?
Infinity Train on Cartoon Network.
Infinity Train.
Yeah, that one's another very kooky one, yeah. And since we've been recommending adventure games all night long, did you get a chance to play The Dream Machine by any chance?
No.
That is one that's all stop motion, like clay, like physical items that they use to make the world. It's entirely like all dream logic craziness, too.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I spoke to the developer of that one, I think, last year. It took them, I think, like about a decade or so to make that, because all they had to make everything by hand to put into the world.
So like the Neverhood.
Yes, that one. I've never played that one, but everyone keeps telling me I need to check it out at some point.
Oh, it's beautiful, and the music is amazing too on that one.
Let's see. I think again we did not really get a chance to talk about being a sole developer, but I am always happy to have you come back on. We could again, like these casts. I didn't think we were actually going to hit 2 hours, but again, time has no meaning when these things happen. But yeah, if you are free in the future, Julia, definitely send me a message, and I'll be more than happy to have you back on.
That'd be amazing. That'd be like, I feel like I haven't asked you what questions you want to ask about it, about the project or anything in general. So that's something we could do next time.
Yeah, and again, like that's the beauty of these casts. Like these conversations can just blossom. And you never know where they're going to go. And I would like to thank again your fans and the adventure game fans for tuning in. They ask a lot of really great questions. I think they kind of help to keep this going for so long. It's always great when the chat is so fast I can't keep track of it. That's always a win.
Yes, thanks for coming. I'm sorry I can't. Like when I just signed on, I saw that chat, and I'm like, I can't do both of these things. I'm sorry if I missed anyone who said hi in the chat. Hi to all you guys. Thank you so much for coming out. It means a lot to me.
So I think with that, I guess just some final wrap-up questions for you, and then I will let you go for tonight. So I guess the first one, you mentioned, of course, that you're doing streaming, I think, of the music and other kinds of things.
Yes.
Where can people find you, and when do you do your streaming?
Okay, so well, we've been me and Dan, musician, have been experimenting a bit with this. So I we're going to be streaming on Twitch Tuesday, April the 14th at 8 p.m. Eastern time. My Twitch is A_Maple Mystery.
Okay.
And that is also, there's a link to that on thecrimsondiamond.com. So if you go to thecrimsondiamond.com and you click on the little Twitch icon, that should take you right to the channel. And yeah, so Dan is going to be debuting a brand new track for the Crimson Diamond that we're working on the Roland MT32, and also he's going to show us what underscoring is, and we're gonna do some demonstrations of that. And so it's really cool. I learn a lot, and hopefully other people who watch will learn a lot too.
And do you
Yeah, and
do?
also oh, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, is that a regular stream you do weekly, or is it like a kind of like a rare thing, or like more of a
Right.
special?
We're still working it out. So we did one 2 weeks ago, and that was a lot of fun. So I don't know if we're going to try to maybe come up with the schedule, but we're still working out a lot of the details and the technical stuff. Um, but yeah, maybe so this coming Tuesday, and then from there we're going to have to give a think about actually doing a schedule of this stuff, because we're thinking maybe I could do like an art stream or something and for that process. Maybe that would be something people are interested in.
Mm-hmm.
If you guys are interested in that, please let me know so I know that it'd be something people would look forward to. But yeah, so we're not really sure right now, but because of the current situation, I think we're more open to these types of to doing live streaming and stuff like that. But we're just starting out.
Okay. And I guess this is a very important question to ask. When are you aiming to have the Crimson Diamond out? You've mentioned, of course, that there is the demo free on Steam, but do you have an estimated release date for the other chapters?
So it's on the demo's on Steam. The demo's on itch.io as well, and there's also a direct download from my site. So there's a few places you can pick it up. As for release, there is no fixed release. I was hoping before the holidays this year, but I can't believe it's April, first of all.
I know.
That seems very unfair that it's April.
Yes.
Um, so um, I'm gonna say like when it's done, when it's ready to be safe, so not to disappoint anybody. But yeah, it's my first time going through this process, and I'm learning things every day about how to develop it. And one of the things I've learned is, yeah, so I've got most of the assets done, but the more I make of the game, the more I have to test, and the more can go wrong. So the testing tends to really take up a lot more time the further I get into the project. So
Mm-hmm.
I can't even begin to guess when it'll be done. But you guys, of course, I'll be shouting it from the rooftops when it.
And as Chad said in chat, when it's done is the perfect and honest answer. It is the mantra, I think, of indie dev. When it's done.
Yeah, I know. I've had people say, "Don't rush, just make it. Make the game you want to make." Well, I'm lucky because yeah, I don't have like a publisher telling me, this has to be out by Q4, whatever. There's none of that. So there's little reason for me not to try to make it as best as I can. So I'm going to.
All right, great. In terms of social media, any places you would like to plug?
Sure. So on Twitter, so I've got two Twitters going. So there's one that is just the Crimson Diamond stuff. So if you go to thecrimsondiamond.com and you click on the Twitter icon, it's going to take you to just game news. Because I think some people with Twitter, it's one of those things where, you know, Twitter is a whole mess sometimes. And so if you just want game news and nothing but specific game news as it pertains to the Crimson Diamond, I would recommend following the Twitter that is on thecrimsondiamond.com. I have a personal Twitter that you can follow, so I don't do any follow backs or anything on Crimson Diamond official Twitter. But I'm at Julia Minamata, so I know that's a mouthful to spell. I don't even know. Should I spell that out, Josh?
Sure, go right ahead, and I'll include a link to it in the description of the recorded version of this.
Okay. So I'm at Julia Minamata. That's my personal Twitter. It's at JuliaMinamata. And that one is, if you don't mind getting Japanese mascots in your feed. Like, I follow really cute Twitter feed, and I'm not a crazy person on there, but I just if you don't want me, retweeting friends' awesome projects and stuff. But if you do want Japanese mascots in your feed, and if you do want to see my friends' awesome projects, then definitely follow me there, because I tend to engage more on that one. So yeah, there's that. There is a Facebook fan page for the Crimson Diamond. You can find that also on the website. And there is an Instagram that I don't use. It's also there. If you want to Instagram, I'm sorry, it's there. And I do have a YouTube channel. And so when Dan and I we live stream it on Twitch. But after the fact, we'll stick it up on YouTube. And all that, again, is on thecrimsondiamond.com. But if you just search YouTube for Julia Minamata, or yeah. Yeah, I think so. Just my name. I think you should. It's my name. Yeah.
All right. And for the game's eventual release, obviously you mentioned it's on Steam, it's on itch. Are you planning for any other platforms for the release?
Yeah, I'm hoping GOG. The only reason that it's not, the demo's not, is I don't think GOG is crazy about putting demos on their platform. Because I did apply to get it on there, and it never showed up, I don't think. So I do hope it will be on GOG as well. It's up to them, though.
All right. And I guess before I do my end of the stream, my old little marketing speech, I guess my final question for you for tonight then is, do you have anything you'd like to say to the fans to wrap this cast up with?
Okay. I'll say thank you, everyone who's here. Thank you for watch this later. Thank you for anyone who's ever, said they like how it looks on Twitter, or have emailed or given me feedback about bugs. As a solo indie dev, it can get really isolating, even in the best of times, because I'm working on it mostly. And sometimes it can be hard to remember that there are people that are interested in the game, people who are enthusiastic about the game, people who are looking forward to playing the full game. And so when I get messages, it goes a long way to making me feel like, this, all the time and energy that I'm putting in is worth it. And if people enjoy the game, then it will. So thank you, everyone who is following me right now, will follow me. And yeah, I hope you like it. When it does come out, I guess that's all I can say.
All right, sounds great. And again, Julia, when you have free time in the future, it'll be great to follow up with you. And yeah, I need to start thinking about, if you're interested, about doing an adventure game roundtable and get a few more developers on. We can just have a whole chat about the adventure genre.
100%. I'm 100% on.
All right, so for everybody watching, we're going to end things here. If you're new, be sure to check out our Discord and Patreon link down below. I'm on Twitter at GWBycer, that's BYCER. If you want to follow me and talk, get my random thoughts on design, or send me games for me to check out, or people to bug about coming on for more of these casts. And if you are somebody who's interested in talking about game design, teaching it, or working on an upcoming game, we have plenty of time since we're all stuck inside now. So please get in touch. And with that, I'm trying to think if there's anything else from my side. Oh, and of course, again, I gotta do my own little social media thing. Be sure to like and subscribe and all that to this channel. And there'll be links to all of Julia's works and such in the description down below for the recorded version. But for the live folks, I will be back for my regular game stream probably the next 30 minutes or so, and come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Again, Julia, it has been an absolute pleasure hanging out with you this evening. Best of luck with getting the game finished, and yep, let's talk again real soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Not a problem. Alright, everybody, with that said, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you all next time for another discussion about the art and design of video games.